Welcome to Untold History. Today, in the second chapter of our Samurai and Blood series, we're going to meet one of the most feared, admired, and hated figures in Japanese history, Oda Nobunaga. A feudal lord who disrespected traditions, feared the gods, and forever changed the course of medieval Japan. The man who paved the way with fire. Year 1534. He was born into the Oda clan, a minor family in the province of Owari. He was not a noble of great lineage, nor did he have an imposing army. But from a young age, Nobunaga displayed something that could not be inherited: political instinct, military audacity, and an absolute contempt for social hypocrisy. He was nicknamed the Great Fool of Owari because he wore eccentric clothes, rode horses without decorum, and disrespected the formalities of Bushido. They underestimated him. And it was a fatal mistake. The opportunity came in 1560. A powerful daimyo, Imagawa Yoshimoto, was marching toward Kyoto with an army that was both superior in numbers and confidence. Nobunaga, then just 26 years old and with very few men, planned a surprise attack in the middle of a storm. At the Battle of Okahazama, he set a perfect ambush. Imagawa's soldiers were massacred. Yoshimoto himself died on the battlefield. Nobunaga not only won, he made his presence felt. And from that day on, all of Japan knew his name. But what was most impressive about Nobunaga wasn't just his military genius. It was his modern vision of power. He understood that warfare had changed, and he didn't hesitate to incorporate firearms on a massive scale. While many daimyo continued to value the sword and bow as symbols of honor, Nobunaga allied himself with Portuguese traders and began equipping his troops with arquebus. Their widespread use on the battlefield would change Japanese military history forever. And that was demonstrated in Nagashino years later, where his ally Tokugawa Ieyasu defeated the famous Takeda cavalry Shingen thanks to the lines of arquebusiers Nobunaga had trained, protected by wooden palisades. An innovation more reminiscent of Europe than traditional Japan. But his ambition was not just territorial. Nobunaga wanted to destroy the old order. He fought against the great Buddhist monasteries, such as Enryaku-ji, which functioned as truly independent states, with armies of warrior monks, their own taxes, and political power. He saw them as an obstacle to progress. His most brutal attack was against the Ishiyama Monastery, Hongon-ji, and Mount Hai Monastery, where he massacred thousands of monks, women, and children. A merciless massacre that earned him the nickname, the Demon of the Sixth Heaven. Cruelty? Not entirely. Nobunaga understood that to unify Japan, he needed to break religious power. In his vision, the temple could not dictate orders to the castle. The new order had to be military, centralized, and secular. That's why he didn't hesitate to destroy anything sacred if it stood in his way. For him, the end justified the means. He also promoted trade. He reduced tolls, protected routes, and encouraged urbanization. He was interested in flourishing markets because that fueled his army, his coffers, and his legitimacy. He wasn't a mere warlord, he was a modern power builder. He even temporarily allied himself with Christian missionaries, not out of devotion, but out of strategy. He saw them as a useful counterweight to organized Buddhism. He gave them land, freedom of worship, and permits to build churches, especially in Western Japan. As long as they served to weaken his internal enemies, he tolerated them. But he never relinquished his control over them. Nobunaga also had an unpredictable, ferocious temper. He could reward generously or execute without flinching. He punished incompetence mercilessly. His allies admired him and feared him. You never knew when you might be next. But that same energy, that mix of charisma and terror, made him invincible. In 1573, he finally succeeded in overthrowing the last Ashikaga shogun. A huge symbolic blow. The shogunate that had ruled Japan for more than 2 centuries disappeared overnight. Nobunaga didn't proclaim himself shogun. He didn't need to. He was the power behind all power. By the end of that decade, he had already dominated much of central Japan. He had defeated historical enemies, subdued entire provinces, and sent a clear message to the rebellious daimyo: resistance was death. But he couldn't complete it. In 1582, at the height of his power, he was resting at Hanno-ji Temple in Kyoto. There, surrounded only by a few guards, he was betrayed by one of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide. The reason was never entirely clear. Ambition, revenge, political calculation. The truth is that Mitsuhide surrounded him, set fire to the temple, and Nobunaga, surrounded and with no way out, committed suicide. The demon had fallen. Japan was stunned. The man who had changed the rules of the game, who had challenged the temples, the clans, the shogunate, had died at the hands of his own people. But his death wasn't the end. His dream survived. At that moment, a new name began to stand out. A former general of his. A man born a peasant, with no noble surname, no samurai lineage, but with the same ambition, cunning, and determination. Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And that, we'll see in the next chapter. Thank you for joining us for this new episode of Untold History. If you enjoyed the content, we invite you to subscribe, leave your comments, and share it with those who love history as much as you do. We continue to reconstruct the past, one story at a time. See you next time.